talking.
Not too close.
Okay. Not too close to you or too close to the microphone?
Yes.
Or both? All right, so I'm Andrew Pertzlick. I've been in the Senate just for 1 year. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give my thoughts on kind of what I've learned from the year and how I look at it going into this next year in legislative procedures that try to tackle the climate change. I can do my own buttons, yeah. So I was going to try to keep it to these three things. It's all about fossil fuels. Well, it's all about the economy and Bill, the death of Bill. That's the leaving it on a high note.
The bill died.
Yes. And then Selena Coburn will get into some specifics. So I'm the co-chair from the Senate for the Climate Solutions Caucus that is developed in the legislature from the COCO's chair. And it's been a great experience for me to work with all the other climate activists that we have in the State House. We're very lucky to have folks like Representative Coburn in the House that is really focused on this issue. And it's been great to work with them over the summer and last legislative session on the things that we hear more from. So you've seen these kind of graphs. It's clearly that it's all about fossil fuels. And the reason I want to emphasize is that I think we're spending too much time just on messaging on talking about greenhouse gas emissions and talking about metric tons of greenhouse gas equivalents, because that doesn't mean anything. And if I go door to door, or I was at a community action event, or I was at the career center, and talking to those people, if I talked about metric tons of greenhouse gas emission equivalents, they really gloss over it. They do not know what I'm talking about. Their interest really drops off. And so greenhouse gas accounting is important, and we need to do it, and we need to dedicate state employees to keep tracking it and reporting. And EAN does a great job on kind of deciphering that into easy graphics. But I want us that are concerned about climate change to focus on fossil fuels and reduction of gallons of fossil fuels. Because when we talk about fossil fuels, that's really greenhouse gases. It's about 90% of our emissions in Vermont are fossil fuels. So if we can reduce fossil fuels to zero, we're basically reducing greenhouse gases to zero. And I think it's a lot easier for folks to kind of comprehend, because they know what a gallon of gas is. They know what a gallon of propane is, even though it's a weird measurement for propane. So I just want to focus our attention on gallons of gasoline. And that's the way I look at it, and the other work that I've done outside of my role as a Senate is we need to transform our complete economy that's based completely on fossil fuels. And this is a radical idea. And when we talk about percentages of reductions of emissions, it seems like we might be able to get there and still kind of maintaining our current process of being completely dependent on fossil fuels, even though you can, but we're not saying that. So I think another reason why we talk about reducing fossil fuels to zero, because it's a more direct conversation. It's saying we cannot do what we're doing today at all. We cannot burn any fossil fuels. And that's more of a direct conversation than just saying we have to reduce our emissions to zero. Make sure I say other things I don't want to talk to you about. And I also think gallons of fossil fuel is easier to track. Greenhouse gas accounting is complicated, and there's like special people that specialize in it. And we're about 4 years or 3 years delayed. So we're talking about what the greenhouse gas emissions were, or the metric tons equivalent, were in 2015. And we know what our gallons of fossil fuels sold were this year. In a month, we'll know what the 2019 numbers are. And we can really track progress in a more real time than we can with metric tons equivalent. And I think that makes it more real for the discussion and for policy makers. And again, it really will help us to focus on that we need to completely transform this our whole economy that's based on fossil fuels. And I've been focusing a lot on heating fuels. So just to think about this, last year, we burned 130 million gallons of heating fuel. Just a little old Vermont, 130 million gallons. So that is a lot of fuel. And you can sort of picture, I mean, it gets kind of weird when you talk about hundreds of millions of anything, but it's a big number. So to transform that number, so if we're serious about our goals and serious about the climate goals or other energy goals, we have to get that to zero. And that is, it's going to be difficult. But I want to have that conversation and saying, not are you just okay with getting to zero emissions, but are you okay with not burning any fossil fuels for heating in Vermont in the next 10 years? And how do we do that? It's 120 million gallons and that's just heating oil and kerosene. There's propane and natural gas, and we still have people burning coal in this state. I'm working with a place down in Brattleboro that is trying to get off coal for a big apartment building. So yes, that is, it's all about fossil fuels. That was the first point. So on to my second point, but I have some quotes that I developed from other quotes. So I read some quotes that made me think about this issue on fossil fuels. I don't know if you know the famous Einstein quote about simultaneously preventing war and preparing for war. It's similar to this fossil fuel issue. It's like, well, I get in this discussion a lot on wood heat, and if you want to later, we can talk about wood heating and like the biomass plant at Dartmouth College and things like that. But I hear a lot of people saying, well, we can't use wood for heating, so we're just going to have to use fossil fuels for a little bit longer, and then we'll get to this renewable future. But I feel that we can't do that. We cannot say that we're going to continue to burn fossil fuels until we get to this future. We can right now use fossil fuels or not use fossil fuels. There is renewable energy solutions for all of our fossil fuel uses today. We can make that transition. So we do not need to support the fossil fuel infrastructure while we move to a renewable future. And then there's Wimpy, if you're familiar with that guy, Popeye's friend. He has a famous quote about paying for a hamburger tomorrow that you give him today. So that's my Wimpy quote over there, if you can all read it. And then there's the Martin Luther King quote about injustice, threats to injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think that's also something that we think about fossil fuel. Like you can say, well, here it's okay, but if you're supporting the fossil fuel infrastructure anywhere, you are supporting the infrastructure that we need to reduce to zero. So it's hard anywhere you're supporting fossil fuels in any sector of the economy to say like, well, it's okay for cars, or it's okay for this heating, this one project, like Dartmouth, like, well, just for these few years, we're going to do fossil fuels. I think that support for fossil fuel industry is a threat to climate in our efforts everywhere. You hear a lot about fossil fuels being a bridge to renewable energy. So I'm showing you some pictures of the bridges that the fossil fuel industry wants to build. And that they really are bridges to nowhere. We should not buy into this. We should just focus on the renewable energy solutions that we know we can do today. And that's what I'm trying to do in my life and in my role in the Senate. And so the second point, which I don't have a slide for, is that it's all about the economy. And that is that there's huge economic development potentials for making the switch. It isn't an argument that fossil fuels are bad and we should just pay a lot of money to get rid of them. It's just that fossil fuels are not part of our future. We don't want to be supportive in any way. But the good news is we can switch to renewable energies for all those same uses, and it'll be cheaper in the long run. It'll be better for us in numerous ways. So why would we use a fuel that costs more, that is polluting our environment, that's causing climate change, that's toxic to touch or spill or anything, when the economic development is on the balance as on for renewable energy? When we buy fossil fuel in Vermont, or if we're buying electricity from fossil fuel in New England, all of that money leaves the state and it leaves the region. We're not producing any fossil fuel. in the state or in our ISO control area. So there's the benefits. So every dollar that we spend on fossil fuels, 80 cents leaves the state. But if we spend $1 on wood heating, 80 cents stays in the state. If we spend $1 on renewable electricity that was produced in Vermont, 80 cents of that dollar stays in the state. And that money cycling through the economy is going to be very beneficial for our economy and support the jobs and the transition in a way that's going to be an economic boon to the state and not an economic drag. So I think that is also where I try to lead the discussion with folks, is that there's a huge opportunity here economically for the state. And we should take advantage of it. There's no reason that I see to continue our reliance on fossil fuels, other than that it is such an ingrained part of everything that we do. It's a whole paradigm shift to think about this future and how we get there. And that's what we're working on. Yeah. So to lead on to what Representative Coburn is going to talk about in the Climate Solutions Caucus, I have a diagram here about the legislative efforts. I want to talk a little bit about kind of how we look at legislative things. Here's my diagram on bills dying. Often you see these things like how a bill becomes a law, and it's a happy little story about Bill and how he gets to become a law. Well, 90% of the bills die. And really what happens to all bills is they die. Like, that's really what happens to bills. Like the few that get through, I don't know if you can read it on here, but it's only about 10%. And this year that I did it, there was over 1,000 bills and only 170 got passed. It's very easy to kill a bill. And the lobbyists in the room, or former lobbyists in the room, they can tell you, it's like, well, we could kill bills. That's the easy thing. So when we're trying to get things done, we have to have it's a balancing act of how do we get something done, get through this whole convoluted process and make something happen. We want to get that done, but we also have big aspirations and we want to make big things happen. And we want to get it all the way to where the governor signs it. And I wanted to say a couple things about that, in that I hear a lot of people saying, well, pass the most aggressive thing you can and then just force the governor to veto it. And that'll be an election issue that we can bring up with the governor. But the issue is if it's a political loser, the governor won't veto it. I think that the governor is not dumb. The governor's staff understands electoral politics, obviously. So they're making a calculation all the time when a bill comes to the governor, whether to veto it or not. We want to get bills to the governor that the governor will sign. If the governor vetoes a bill, that's because he thinks it's a political winner to veto it. So if we got him a 60 cents carbon tax, a carbon tax, for example, that would raise fossil fuel prices 60 cents, the governor could veto that thinking, I'm going to win on this. So we don't want to give him bills that he thinks he's going to veto and is going to be a political winner. The only way to prove the theory is to have the election and see what happens. But they can message the veto in a way that's good for the governor, even though we think it's not. And so just making the governor veto aggressive bills is not necessarily going to help us in elections or in getting things passed. So a couple things that I just want to say going forward, in addition to the Climate Solution Caucus bills that Selena's going to talk about that I'm working on, is the thinking of bills that we can do that have a collective impact, because Vermont is small, even though I don't agree with the naysayers that say Vermont is too small to have an impact. Our emissions are small in the global scheme of things, but we can have a huge impact regionally with the other states that are much larger in this nation and nationally about their impacts and their influence. That if we need to work on things that can be messages to these other states. This kind of gets us what I was talking about with the governor veto. So if we do something too aggressive and it doesn't work, then we've really set ourselves back way too far. It's more efficient to take one step forward, then to take 2 steps forward, and then a step back. And the couple examples I use for other things I work on. Another thing I care a lot about is ranked choice voting. And the fact that Burlington had ranked choice voting and then they got it repealed. Everywhere around the country, people that don't like ranked choice voting bring that up all the time. They're like, well, Burlington had it and then they voted against it. And this happens with Vermont's attempt to get universal health care. They say, well, Vermont had it, but then it didn't work. So states can't do universal health care. And they use those as examples for why it doesn't work. We don't want to start a program in Vermont on getting rid of fossil fuels, do it for a couple of years and have it not expensive or not work. And then the other states is like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, look at Vermont, that didn't work. We want to have programs that are successful, that other states like, wow, look at that program. Vermont reduced their fossil fuel use by 50%, and they grew their whole economy and had more jobs and have more revenue. That's the program that we want to do in our state. And that's what things that I'm trying to work on. In that vein, on my transportation committee, I'm working on electric vehicle electrification issues that really other states can use as models that we can take much bigger. Because Vermont could get to 0 on our emissions, and if other states don't see that as a path that they can take, then we're not going to get to our global emission goals. So I'm working on electrification. I can talk about that if you guys want to. Talking about fossil fuel registrations, where we have a lot of great fossil fuel companies in the state. And when I bash fossil fuels and say we should not burn any fossil fuels at any time, I don't mean to attack our local fossil fuel dealers. These dealers provide a very important service to Vermonters. They deliver fuel to the furthest customer that's on the longest dirt road at the dead end, and they will get them fuel 24/7, 365, and often work with them on payment plans and work with low-income folks. So they are important customer service companies, and I want to work with them on this transition. Some of them are interested. Some of them are working to this. And one thing that I want to do is work more with the fossil fuel dealers on making this transition. But right now, fossil fuel vendors are not, well, they're regulated in many different ways, but they're not regulated as an industry of vending fossil fuels. So I want to have a registration system for fossil fuel vendors, have a registry, so we can start working with it. We don't even know really who they all are. We don't have one list. Even Matt Coda of the Fuel Dealers Association told me, well, that would be great, because I don't even know who all the fuel vendors are. And then we can start working with them and getting reporting. Right now, we have a difficult time getting data on how much fossil fuels we use. Like if we want to break it down by county or by town, if like town energy committees or regional planning commissions want to like, how much fossil fuel do we use in our county? We can't get that. The fuel dealers have that info. So having reporting requirements equal to what the utilities do, I think would be very helpful. And I'm also working on a bill with Senator Pearson and others about changing our renewable energy standard, which will make sure our renewable electricity is 100% and that we're getting as much as we can locally. I would like to limit the amount of power the utilities are able to import from Canada and really focus in Vermont and in the New England, the ISO control area, where we get all our power. And I'm also working on a bill with Senator Polina on a Green New Deal fund, where a lot of these issues that we want to come up with run into this problem, get killed on this graph because the funding for it. And so we're working on a bill that would provide a fund that would be, his idea is to run it through a committee through the treasurer's office. And it would be $20 million a year based on a surcharge of those like 1% or 0.5% of Vermonters that saved over $200 million a year because of the Trump tax cuts. So there's $250 million a year that they're saving because of the federal tax cuts, that if we just took 10% of that, $20 million a year that they pay for the next 10 years that we make this transition off of fossil fuels, we think that's a fair way to raise the money to create the fund needed to make some of these transitions. So with that, I'll pass it on to Representative Covert.
slides. I'm so glad I had a really far view of your how a bill dies.
Yeah.
As I gear up for the next legislative session. Okay.
Joey,
Just figure out where.
Joey, slides.
Oh, I see it. Got it. Sorry. Just letting into the background there. Go. Okay, great. So I am Representative Selena Colburn, and I represent the part of Burlington that houses the University of Vermont and a lot of the surrounding neighborhoods. And I'm the clerk of the Climate Solutions Caucus in the legislature. So I'm going to build on Senator Perchlik's remarks and just tell you a little bit about our work and the platform we've developed heading into the coming legislation. But first of all, I just really want to offer my very heartfelt thanks to all of you for being here on a Saturday. It was really amazing to walk into this full room. How many of you serve on a town energy committee or staff at town energy committee? Well, again, really thank you. I started my work in elected office in municipal government. I was a city councilor, and I just want to really recognize how important your mostly volunteer work is to both tackling the climate crisis, but also just the daily lives of people in your communities. So thank you, and thank you for being here on a Saturday to talk about these issues. So the Climate Caucus was founded in 2012 by Senator Chris Pearson and Representative Mary Hooper. And it has quickly become the largest issues-based caucus in the legislature. We have nearly 90 members now, which is when we get to 90 members, half the legislature will actually be a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus, which I am pretty certain will happen in the coming session. So that's really exciting. And we've seen just huge growth in the time that I've been in the legislature in the last three years in this caucus. And I think it's because legislators hear from their constituents that this is a really, really important issue. We saw like an influx of people wanting to join around the time of the climate strike this summer, for instance. So there are 86 of us now. I believe we meet weekly in the legislature, and those are actually open meetings. Historically, we've met Thursday afternoons at noon. People can come and join us and hear what we're talking about. We do try increasingly to use that time to really roll up our sleeves and get work done. We used to kind of hear more presentations and information, but we're really ready to work in this caucus. But that said, you're very, very welcome to join us in those meetings at any point in time. So after the last legislative session, I think a lot of us felt we would have really liked to do more. And so we devised a process to get our caucus more organized, more focused, headed into the 2020 legislative session. So within a week or so of adjournment, we actually held a retreat for all of our members that was facilitated by Paul Costello. And we started to think about what our priorities were and what we wanted to organize around. And we formed work groups that worked diligently over the summer to come up with legislative proposals around those issues. So we had a group working on transportation. We had a group working on the green economy, and we had a group working on building efficiency. And then when the fall rolled around, we decided to take that platform. So we had like 70 pages of recommendations that then our Climate Caucus co-chairs distilled into a platform of 4 banner bills. And I'm going to talk to you about what those bills are in just a moment. But what we've been doing is all fall, we've been going community by community around the state and holding what we're calling road shows. There's one coming up in South Burlington on Monday night. Monday night.
Anybody's welcome.
Anybody's welcome. 6:30, right?
Yep.
And sharing this with Vermonters and evolving the platform in response to what we hear from you. So I'm gonna try to be pretty brief, zipping through it. And I hope that when we do have time for questions, you'll share not just any questions you have that Angie and I and Lauren as well, who's very well versed in this, can answer, but also feedback for us about what you think is missing, what you think is important, what you'd like to see. So that said, I'm going to move through these pretty quickly because I'm sure you saw this morning. We know this story, right? We are nowhere near meeting the statutory goals that we've set, nowhere near meeting our comprehensive energy plan goals, and nowhere near meeting the Paris Climate Accord goals that our governor recently committed us to. And we know that the biggest sources of our emission are transportation and heating here in Vermont, and that we need strategies to tackle those. And this is a slide, I'm sure you saw a version of this slide this morning. This is a slide that I think really resonates with us in the legislature as we try to build a resilient local economy. It just doesn't make sense to be sending so much of our dollars out of state to an industry that just isn't directly benefiting Vermonters. So we have a 2020 agenda that is based around what we're calling 4 banner bills. So we're looking at accountability. How do we get us back on track with actually meeting these goals that we've set? We're looking at cap and invest strategies in the transportation sector. We're looking at building efficiency, and we're looking at continuing the path to fully renewable electricity that Senator Perchlik talked about. We also have 2 groups that are continuing their work into the legislative session. So we have a group working on the issue of resiliency, and we have a group working on some underlying guiding principles that who really care about this issue in the legislature can use to assess all kinds of legislation for its climate impacts that comes through the building. And these are by no means the only bills or the only work that's happening to tackle the climate crisis in the legislature, but this is what our process evolved as, where we as a caucus are going to try to really focus some energy this coming year because we think these are actionable and achievable. So some of you may have heard of the Global Warming Solutions Act. We have bills on this in the House and the Senate. I'm one of the lead sponsors of the original House bill on this with Sarah Copeland-Hansis, who is a co-chair of the Climate Caucus. And what this bill does is it creates a system in government by which we actually have to be accountable for our goals. So it charges, the original bill charges the Agency of Natural Resources, but we're looking at a kind of a 2.0 version of this bill that would actually create a climate council made up of stakeholders in state government, but also of people like you that will be charged with developing and updating and maintaining a plan that will actually help the state reach these goals. So we've had these lofty goals in statute since I think 2006. How do we actually get there? And then we also have in this bill a private right of action. So if the state does not create this plan, does not enact the plan, and does not meet our goals, you as Vermonters can bring the state to court and get injunctive relief. So you can basically get a court order that will direct us to get back on track. And this is based on legislation in Massachusetts some time ago that actually, you know, we're still trying to understand the correlation and causation here, but Massachusetts has seen a reduction in emissions since really being taken to court over their Global Warming Solutions Act, and they have lower emissions per capita than we do in Vermont. So it's not just that they started out higher and got lower. They really have done a better job of this on a whole as we have. So we're looking at Setting targets. The targets we're looking at right now are essentially to get us on track with our Paris goals by 2025, to get us on track with our comprehensive energy plan goals over time. And then by the time we reach those goals in 2050, which I think are about an 85% reduction from our 1990 levels, we're also looking at what a net zero framework might look like on top of those reductions. So that's the Global Warming Solutions Act. I cannot pretend to be a cap and invest expert, although I'm really learning. I'm excited to go to the Transportation Climate Initiative session this afternoon. But this is something actually that the executive branch has taken a leadership role in. So I think it's now up to like 11 states in the District of Columbia are participating in something called the Transportation Climate Initiative. And this is a cap and invest program to create a regional cap on transportation emissions for New England and Mid-Atlantic states. That's based a lot on RGGI and other programs like the Western Climate Initiative. And then the proceeds of this could be used to invest in clean transportation alternatives, whether that's through consumer incentives, whether that's through building out pedestrian and bike infrastructure, whether that's accelerating and expanding our public transportation access. Those are the kind of investments we can make. What we are seeing our role in is in the legislature potentially, and for the Climate Caucus, is threefold. So first of all, the governor's office has committed us to investigating and developing the model, and a draft framework did come out this fall. And again, you can hear a lot more about that this afternoon if you're interested. We haven't committed to actually joining the Transportation Climate Initiative, and we feel that that's really imperative. We also feel that it's really imperative. So in the draft framework that came out, it said that jurisdictions or states could take the proceeds that came to them and invest those in basically whatever they wanted as they see fit. We feel like it's really important that those funds are directed to exactly the kinds of examples I just talked about, to clean transportation alternatives. We don't want this going to build new highways, to maintain highways. We want this to put us on the path. Because a good cap and invest program is not a permanent program, right? The goal is to continue to reduce emissions and make the program ultimately obsolete. The other thing we're interested in looking at is, can we leverage our expected revenues from participation in this program to possibly do some bonding, some borrowing that sets us up really well and accelerates our opportunity to make some of these kinds of investments. We have another bill where we're looking at workforce development, particularly in building efficiency, but really across trades. So we have all of these professions that interact with Vermonters around issues of efficiency, particularly in the building trades, right? So we want to make sure that frontline workers in those industries know what Vermont's goals are educated in how to tell consumers their options for creating more efficient homes, for driving more efficient cars, and that they actually tell Vermonters about those goals, about some of the incentive programs that might be available to them. Some of these professionals are licensed, so things like plumbers, HVAC contractors, electricians, realtors, home inspectors. And so we're looking at how these things intersect with our licensing regulations and whether there might be some opportunities to strengthen those. And then there are other folks who aren't licensed, like car dealers, right? Who we know that there are efficient electric vehicles, but they're not necessarily front and center on the lot. We don't necessarily have dealers prepared to tell Vermonters about how to access incentives. So we want to work on all of those things, and then also continue to be looking at our building codes and how they're enforced and how we can strengthen them and also strengthen enforcement. Finally, and I won't say as much about this because Senator Perchlik just talked about this, but we're looking at how we strengthen both our renewable requirements, our in-state requirements, particularly in electrification. We're looking at just regulatory barriers in general to renewables, things like, especially around things like solar installation. And then finally, the legislature set us on a path last session to look at the role of Efficiency Vermont and whether we could expand the role that they play beyond just electric efficiency, beyond home efficiencies, but can Efficiency Vermont help Vermonters access transportation alternatives and things like that. So we're looking at their role, and I believe a bill will be coming forward in the Senate around that issue. And that's really our platform. You can tell by the slide, I hope that we feel a sense of urgency about it. That's where we're at in the legislature. We're wanting to collaborate with all of you, with our many, many allies, and we have been for some time, and Lauren's been an amazing partner. I told you about the legislature. These are some questions that I think it's really worth asking about the executive branch and what they're doing. If you have a chance to ask them how they're going to partner with us in this. So what does it mean that the governor committed us to meeting those Paris climate goals, and how do we get there? The governor had a climate action commission with 21 members. Joey Miller served on it. They put forward 50 recommendations. Which of these could be moved forward in the coming year? Because not many have been moved forward so far. And then what in the budget, when we come back in January, one of the first things that we get is a proposed budget and budget address from the executive branch. What in the budget is going to help us address the the climate crisis this year? It would be great to have a budget for the climate caucus too, but there's probably campaign finance laws around that. So we hope you're on board. We really want to partner with all of you, as many Vermonters as we can in this. And I'll just close by recognizing we think this is a meaningful and actionable agenda that sets us on a path to get back on track with our goals, to make significant reductions in those two highest emissions sectors, transportation and heating. But we also recognize the huge sense of urgency that people feel. When we are going around the state and talking about this, we are hearing from people who are saying, yes, but this is not enough. This is not enough. And I just really want to acknowledge that, especially after being at one of these events in Burlington last week, where an 8th grader got up and said, I am terrified for my future. I am terrified about my ability to have and raise children. Do you really think this is enough? And the answer is it's not. So please, my ask to you today is, please help us do this and a lot more. And thank you again so much for your work.
Thank you. So I'm going to get a presentation up. Maybe Joey, could you help me get? So I'm not going to come for a few minutes.
This I can do. I got it.
So I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite events of the year because I always leave feeling so inspired and energized by all the work that you all are doing across the state, and just knowing that there's so many allies in this fight that is so difficult and challenging, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but the creative and innovative work that you all are doing across the state is what is helping us figure out how do we get there. So really appreciate that.
Are you gonna make the transition?
I can do that. Thank you. So my name is Lauren Hurl, and I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Conservation Voters. Can you hear me okay?
Step up a little bit.
Stand over here.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just short, Bob. I can't see over the top.
Anywhere you want.
So I run Vermont Conservation Voters, and we're an organization that works to advocate for strong environmental laws, hold lawmakers accountable, and to help elect pro-environment lawmakers. And I presented on this panel for a number of years. I remember doing it soon after my now 5-year-old was born, and it was all a haze, but really excited to be with you all. And it really feels like things are changing. Do you all feel it? The energy, the enthusiasm, thank goodness. And the leadership that is coming both from community members, the activism that we're seeing is unprecedented, and also the leadership from our lawmakers is unprecedented. So, you know, what was just being described about the work that the Climate Solutions Caucus has done all summer. I mean, they met soon after the session ended to say, okay, how do we do more and do better? And that has never happened before. So it's really exciting, the engagement that we're seeing from across the spectrum, and it's really giving me hope that we can do big things together. I did want to mention, so Representative Colburn, one story of the kind of leadership that I really appreciate, and I think we all need to remember, like, our job is to push for more, sooner, do more work, do better work. But we also need to take time to thank and appreciate the leaders that are doing this hard work. So this year, some of you might have seen in the news, but there was our budget for the state government was going through, and it goes to the floor, and this is set to be a unanimous budget. And Representative Colburn decided, you know what, this budget does not do enough on climate. This is not taking the issue seriously. So she stood up on the floor and became the one vote against our state budget, and made the point that it was because of the lack of investment and prioritization on climate. And no, I mean, you know, leadership so desperately wanted to be able to tell the story of a unanimous budget. And instead, every single news article about the budget talked about this vote against because of climate. And so it really became part of the story in a way, and that's hard to do because you're fucking leadership, you're making a point. People don't really love that, you know, but we all do. So thank you. And that's the kind of courageous leadership that we need, making more of those points and making sure that things aren't just moving through the way they always have, because that's the way they move through. You know, and it's been really great having Senator Perchlik. The expertise and the depth of knowledge that he has on these issues that he's able to bring to the Senate has been really incredibly valuable. And so again, we need to push them to do more faster, but we also need to thank our allies who are working, and, you know, us creating the political space for them to do big, bold things is where we need to be. So we have been working in the environmental community with a growing coalition of partners to develop 2020 climate action priorities. And this coalition includes a number of environmental organizations, but also affordable housing, low income advocates, business groups, youth groups, public health groups, and other allies. And we're always looking to expand this coalition. So if any of you are part of organizations that you think might want to sign on to our climate action plan for 2020, come talk to us afterwards. We want as many organizations and kind of different perspectives signing on to this as possible. So our priorities, we've kind of been doing some parallel play over the summer, developing priorities. And they're largely synced up with what has been presented as the Climate Solutions Caucus priorities, but just wanted to echo kind of where we have landed and what we'll be putting out as a platform document. And really, first and foremost, it is this Global Warming Solutions Act that was described. We really think that fundamentally we need the requirement of meeting our climate targets in statute. And I think an important part of this is both the accountability, because you can take the state to court if they're not acting. So this is forcing the kind of action and the scale of action that we need, as you saw this morning. But I think another key piece of it is it requires the state government to do the strategic planning that is missing right now. So by really focusing on, okay, what are the actions that are going to get us there? And then putting forward a plan and continually revisiting that and updating that, that kind of strategic vision and plan is really, I think, going to help us stay on track and continue to get better and better at really meeting these goals. The next piece of legislation is the 100% clean energy by 2030, and us really looking to ensure that we're doing more in-state renewables, and that our renewable energy standard is resulting in new renewables being built, not just us buying kind of renewable credits that from projects that already exist. So how are we really driving down climate pollution through our renewable energy standard? Our third priority is the evolution of our energy efficiency utilities, and this will allow those utilities to align around this driving down of climate pollution so that we're all kind of facing the same direction and bring new resources to help more Vermonters weatherize their homes, access transportation solutions, and particularly help more low and moderate income folks access these technologies. And finally, we're really focused on the Transportation and Climate Initiative and the state joining that and making that a successful and equitable program. So to us, we know it's not enough, but we think it would be a really good step forward for 2020 if we enacted all of these. And in part, I think it's because it would force the kind of bold, transformative actions that we need by putting this mandate for climate action into state law. So how do we win? First of all, I want everyone to take a moment and say thank you to your neighbor. And I'm serious. Do it.
Hey, thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Wow. The man.
I think it's easy to kind of read the news and get really despondent about how overwhelming this problem is. And so we need to be energizing each other and keeping each other inspired and motivated and appreciate all the hard work that each other are doing. So I say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you guys are doing every day in your communities. And that has been participating in and organizing climate strikes, climate rallies, writing letters to the editor, calling your legislators, getting clean energy projects done in your communities. And I know it has felt painfully slow to all of us, but we are seeing the momentum building and the support growing every day. So we're building that momentum that we need. And this year at the State House, we really saw unprecedented climate action. So from the very first day of the session, there was a climate event. The next week, some students marched to the State House. There was a march from Middlebury to the State House. More people came to the State House calling for climate action this year than ever before. And we need to grow on that and do more and continue it up. So, and our leaders take notice of that. It's really impactful. And so it really is this importance of changing the politics of what's possible around climate action and transforming our kind of leadership, operating from a place of kind of fearing that bold action might be politically hard to fearing that if I don't act, I'm going to get slammed at the ballot box. So we did some polling that I know Joey mentioned this morning, but I was just going to walk you through a couple of the results. So you can look at the slides up here. So this just happened within the last week, December 3rd and 4th. This was out 768 Vermonters. So this is the one that Joey showed you earlier. So 61% of Vermonters very worried about global warming. So, I mean, this is, you almost never see that on issues, and 76% worried overall. So people are thinking about this. That number has jumped up dramatically since just a few years ago. So we know that people are looking for solutions. So compared to just 35% very worried 3 years ago. Concern is high across the state. This is not just a Chittenden County or 89 corridor issue. This is really widely felt. And so if you're talking to your lawmakers from any part of the state, just know that their people are with them in thinking about this issue. We asked about the specific policies that are part of the climate action platform I was just describing. So more than 3/4 support expanding the work of Vermont's energy efficiency utilities. More than 3/4 support requiring the state to act to hit its climate targets, so enacting a Global Warming Solutions Act. More than 3/4 support requiring 100% renewable electricity by 2030. And about 3/4 support significantly increasing the requirement for in-state renewables. 3/4 support the Transportation and Climate Initiative. So this just shows a little bit of the kind of partisan breakdown. So you're seeing wide, high support. Progressive Democrats, Republicans are a little more split, but you still see pretty high support across the board. And again, for these different policies, you're seeing it kind of almost surprisingly consistent across the state. So it's not huge regional differences. And that's just for those other two policies. So I think we should all just be strengthened in the work that we're doing and the advocacy, knowing that Vermonters are behind us. They are concerned about this. They want to see action. They're supportive of the specific kinds of actions that we're talking about for the coming year. And in order to put this action into place, we need to continue organizing, showing up for climate events, writing letters to the editor, calling or sending personal emails to your lawmakers on why you care and expect them to act. It will also take committing to show up during election season to support our allies and to ask hard questions of those people who are standing in the way of progress. What people hear on the campaign trail can really influence what they take with them into the State House and what they feel like they need to act on. If you want to stay engaged and you aren't already, I know there's a lot of longtime activists in this room and some newer faces. You can get on the email lists of VCB, VNRC, VPIRG, our allies, to stay up to date on what's happening and what are kind of key moments to make your voice heard. VNRC and VCB do a weekly climate dispatch. I know it's been referenced a couple times, but so we do these there's a little insert about it. So we do these videos from the State House every Friday. We're getting them up on YouTube and Facebook Live now, so multiple ways to access them, but it's a great way to kind of get a 3-minute snapshot of what's been going on this week and how can you make your voice heard. I also wanted to mention the importance of good people like you thinking about running for office or supporting good candidates. I mean, the impact of having good people in those roles, I really can't state enough how valuable it is to have the kind of passion and expertise and leadership in the decision-making bodies themselves. One of my favorite moments from this past session was a new lawmaker who had run on a climate action platform, and there was a meeting in the Speaker of the House's office, and there were a handful of advocates and a number of legislators, and this woman was like, I ran on a climate action platform. We need to be doing more. And I was like, yes, this is what we need. So having that kind of passion and have it be translating into, the conversations that leadership is having about what needs to make it to the floor and make it all the way through to enactment is really, really critical. So at VCB, we do candidate support. We do candidate trainings. We help elect people. So if you're someone who might be interested in thinking about running or supporting candidates, come talk to me afterwards, or my colleague Sheldon. Raise your hand, Sheldon. She's our political outreach associate. She's fabulous. So it really is important to think about that role that you can play as well. And I know we have a number of former lawmakers here, so thank you all who have already served. And so I had 2 final things of kind of calls to action that I'm really hoping you all can pledge to take before you go today or when you get home and have time to do it. One is, right now, the Democratic caucus is literally deciding what priorities are going to be set for 2020. I would love if you all, those of you who have a cell number and could send a quick text or send an email to your representatives. If you have a Democratic representative, the reason none of them are here today is because they're at this caucus. Send them a message and say, I hope today you are bringing up the need for urgent climate action. Do I see any phones coming out? Who's doing Yeah. If any of you need help finding who your representative might be, come find me. We can do this over lunch. It'll be fun. But they're literally making those decisions today. And so hearing from people who could say, I'm at this great climate conference. We need action. There's so much opportunity. Let's do it. The other call to action kind of echoes what Representative Colburn said, which is we really also need to be calling on the governor. I think so much of what I see, even in op-eds and so on, it's great to call on our lawmakers. We need to do that, but we can't forget that we have to call on the governor and ask him to set out a vision and to be a leader on these issues. It takes all parts of our government working together to do this. So think about, when's the last time you've actually taken the time to go online and leave a message for the governor. They've got the little contact form on the website for the governor's office. You can send a quick message. They need to be hearing that people care about these issues and that they're not just let off the hook for not having a climate vision. So that is critically important. So I will wrap it up there. But again, thank you for all you are doing. Please stay engaged. Any way that we can help be a conduit for you, those of us who are in the State House every day and can try to make it as easy as possible for you to make your voices heard. Please count on us to do that. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to close this because better. We have about 15 minutes for questions. I want to just first, I would say thank you to all three of you, and an extra special thanks to Senator Pertlick and Representative Colburn for all you do. And just to underscore Lauren's point that that these are the folks who are working hard every day, last session, setting the stage for this session. These are our allies. They need support. And we also need to be focusing our attention elsewhere on the governor and on those folks who are challenged to lead. So this is our work to make sure that they feel comfortable, that they're hearing from their constituents, and that we are really creating the space for them to act. So there's a lot to do. I am hopeful that we make progress on this platform, but it's going to take all of us. And it's going to take, because of the fact this is a citizen-led legislature with very little time, and these are big bills. So solidarity and synergy is going to be extra important. So I know there's probably nuances in all of these policies that are imperfect, and we might all want more. And I think I just want to echo Representative Colburn's point that this is a starting point, and we need to be doing way more. And let's figure out how we do that, support you all, make progress, and then set the stage for 2021. 2021. Oh my gosh. Questions. So speak up really loudly and be as brief as possible so we can get to a lot. Fran.
I've attended 2 of these forums. They were good, and the second one that I attended was in Bristol, and there were over 60 people there. The room was standing room only, and the nice thing was that we were sitting in a circle, and there was over an hour for questions. So I want to suggest that when you do more of these, that you give more time for questions. But what I'm really interested in is we keep hearing that there are Democrats in other parts of the state from where I live, which is Addison County, who are waffling or worried about this. They don't have the political, I don't know, capital to do this. They're afraid they're going to be voted out of office. How can I, from my perspective, my legislators are for this, all except for the one Republican. How can we help in other parts of the state to move these legislators and say, yes, we support you, because I don't vote for them.
Yeah. You want to go?
You have something good?
Well, the short answer is you might have to wait for an election. And like that's the real end of the thing. You can work with organizations that are working statewide and know the districts where it's competitive or where there's an opportunity to make a change there. But it is difficult to have an influence in there. And you can reach out, you can do things that the groups have done nationwide, like sending postcards not to the representatives of the district, but to people in that district, and saying, hey, this is important, get involved.
I would maybe put a plug in for the pitch that Linda Gray did about the network. Because really, if we look at, what are the key folks that need some nudging from constituents, it could be as simple as looking at, okay, oh, it's these towns, and I've met this person from this energy committee. Let me call them and make sure that they know that this is a critical moment, or send them a message and say, hey, this is a really important time to get in touch with your lawmaker. So I think just thinking about the people that in those districts, because their voice could be really valuable. Is another thing we can think about, and any way that we can try to make that as easy as possible for folks. We're all ears and really thinking about that.
It would help if you would tell us who those representatives are, because I don't know. So that would be something you could do for us. Just say it's this town, this town, this town, and these are the names.
Yes.
Yes. Ben is going to take the mic around brevity so we can get to the law.
Hi, Greg Dennis with the Climate Economy Action Center of Addison County and 350 Vermont. I'm taking, Senator, your comments to heart. No fossil fuels means no fossil fuels. What are the chances that the legislature in 2020 is going to pass a ban on new fossil fuel infrastructure?
So we have 3 different bills that on the House side, at least, that would get at a fossil fuel infrastructure ban in a few different ways. I think a lot can shift during the legislative session, and what makes that shift happen is pressure from outside the building coming inside the building. I think it is unlikely that, I'm just giving you my honest assessment. This is not my assessment of what I think should be the truth. I'm a co-sponsor of every single one of those bills. I think it is unlikely that any of those bills banning fossil fuel infrastructure will pass in this session. Where I think we may be able to make some progress on this issue is actually in the Global Warming Solutions Act. I mean, first of all, it's hard to meet our goals if we're building out new fossil fuel infrastructure in the state, right? And then if the state can essentially get sued, there's a liability there. But we are looking at, and I think it would be good as this bill comes forward for lawmakers who are involved in the nitty-gritty of the bill to hear your support for this. We are looking at some directive language to the Public Utilities Commission about the criteria that they apply in the review of projects because honestly, we need them as partners, and that hasn't historically been the case. So whether it's looking at how they approve a renewable project or how they disapprove a pipeline project, we need to ensure that their process is helping us meet the goals. And I think there's more possibility and more willingness to move that forward in the context of the Global Warming Solutions Act. That's just my honest assessment. It's not necessarily what I think is right.
Just a quick addition to that. I think I agree with Selena that the chances are slim. I introduced a bill in the Senate and I thought I was smart. I had a little twist on it that I thought I was like, well, this is going to make it so they take it up, but it didn't get taken up at all. And didn't, wasn't even considered to be taken up as far as I could tell. But I think the lessons from the Vermont Yankee plant shutdown and what happened in the State House, like before the federal license was renewed, the conventional wisdom in the State House was 100% that plant is going to be relicensed and that's going to continue to operate. But pretty quickly, and the legislature passed the law saying, even if you get your federal license, you got to come back to the legislature. And really things changed pretty quickly, but partly because we had a new governor in there. But yeah, I think it gives me hope that things can flip pretty quickly.
Yeah, this is a comment for everyone in the room. Yeah, a comment for everyone in the room, and it has to do with putting a Greta on your shoulders. We're in a situation now, we've run out of time. It's time for me to face that we've run out of time, and it's time for the rest of us to face that. If we're responding, having realized we've run out of time, we move swiftly, we move with authority, and if we have to blow the doors off every door on the Capitol and have our voices heard, that's what's necessary. You've got to clone yourselves. You've got to bring 3 of your friends or your neighbors, and you have to make yourself heard. No one is going to do it for us. The governor will not do it for us unless that 61% of Vermonters who are so concerned actually show up and be heard. Put a Greta on your shoulders. She'll drive you crazy. She'll keep you up at night. But by God, you will run out of patience.
Also, just a reminder, you need to kind of point the microphone at your mouth for it to really work.
Thank you for that. I thought that was wonderful. I have a more policy-oriented question, which is that earlier today we heard about a fee-bait idea, which basically is a parallel to the no new infrastructure on fossil fuels. It's basically no new fossil fuel equipment by making a fee high enough on anyone who purchases new fossil fuel car or new fossil fuel heating equipment or any other fossil fuel type of equipment, using the revenue to help those people who can't afford to get it, to get the non-fossil fuel equipment. So just to make sure that everybody knows what I'm talking about on fee-based. I would love to know how much traction you think that's going to get in the legislature, because that's basically no new fossil fuels if you put the tax high enough.
Right. In the Transportation Committee, we worked on fee-based, Senator McDonald's here earlier. He's a big proponent of that. And we did get the Agency of Transportation to do a study on fee-based for vehicles. I thought the study was well done. They didn't take a position either way, but I think it's going to provide a good groundwork. With my colleagues, I hear a lot of interest and support for the idea of fee-based. No state has ever done it yet. It's a lot of people love it, but then when you get into the details, it gets tricky. But I think people really like the idea, so they want to work on it. And so that gives me hope that there's something we can do both on transportation and on heating fuels. And my bill to have fossil fuel vendors be registered kind of helps with those things, because right now we don't have a list of who they even are. Like, so if we knew who they were, we could reach out and say, like, work with them and say, here's how a fee-based would work when you're selling equipment to your customers.
How am I doing?
Oh, there's so many questions. I don't know.
Yes, I'm Danielle LeBerge from Grassroots Solar. I'm also on the 350 Vermont board. And my question was about the Global Warming Solutions Act. What exactly the targets are that that become requirements? So is it the CEP? Is it the Paris? Like, what are the targets that we are going to try to hit that will be mandated? You could go into that a little more.
Sure. So we are in the process of reintroducing this bill. So we're still kind of having those discussions, but I can tell you where I think it's headed. And I'm going to grab my cheat sheet so I make sure I don't misrepresent anything. I think it's also important to note that, like, the committee process is where this stuff will get hashed out. So there will be a new version of this bill introduced in 2020. So what we are thinking about is Paris by 2025. Paris requires, so our statute is essentially silent on 2025, but Paris requires a 27% reduction from our 2005 goals. That's a 13% reduction from our our 2005 emissions. That's a 13% reduction from our 1990 emissions. So it's not as aggressive as our statutory goals. It's not as aggressive as our comprehensive energy plan goals, but as I'm sure you heard this morning, we are nowhere near meeting those Paris targets. And so it would be a huge, and we think achievable with tremendous effort, step for the state of Vermont. Then what we're looking at is by 2030 and 2050, essentially getting us on track with our comprehensive energy plan goals. And there's still some conversation and some hashing out, and the committee process will continue that, but that would be a 40% reduction by 2030. And depending on how you slice it, and as I understand it, an 80 to 95% reduction from those 1990 levels by 2050. The thing that we're also looking at adding into the Global Warming Solutions Act around those goals is looking at, as Maine and New York, who recently passed similar legislation, did, like when we get to those 2050 reductions, if it's a 80, 85, 90, 95, do we use any kind of sequestration or other methods for the remainder to get us to net zero? So we're looking at that. And of course, you know, if we could get to emissions zero by 2050, that's the ultimate goal. But yeah, so that's where I think it's headed, but still in development. Bill hasn't been introduced or finalized yet.
I just want to acknowledge that we're now standing between you and lunch. So should we ask two more brief questions? And I believe Senator Perchlik and Selena, Representative Colburn, Lauren, you'll be here today.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, eat lunch with us, please.
Jill Wilcox of Sharon. I just wanted, you urged everyone to contact the governor, and I just wanted to let you know that some of us has, and he sent a 10-point bullet list of his accomplishments, which you really need to read before you contact the governor, because one of his comments is created the Vermont Climate Action Commission, which has recommended tangible actions to both reduce emissions and increase economic activity across all sectors of Vermont's economy, which sounds fabulous, but he didn't take a single recommendation. So this 10-point bulleted list is all goals or one-time funding things. There's nothing in this list that has anything to do with an ongoing commitment or serious address to climate change. So don't be buffaloed when you call them and they say they've accomplished all this, and be prepared to challenge them on that, if you would. Thank you.
So I was just gonna say that that's a great point. And I mean, one thing, so right now the administration is putting together the budget. There's a public comment period that is either still going on or just happened. So I think saying, you know, what exactly is in your budget? What are the specifics that you're proposing for climate investments, and how far does that get us to actually meeting our climate targets? Could be a short term, but certainly we will be, you know, trying to update and refresh any kind of talking points and messaging of what we can be asking to keeping the pressure up. But I think even just getting those emails is really important. They had to take the time to think about what are we saying on climate and all of that. So thank you for doing that. Good model, and keep in touch with us, and we can try to help make sure we're ramping up the pressure in effective ways. Thanks, Bill.
Just one quick note on that. It sounds like they're sending you, they're just copy pasting from their own website. So if you do get them on the phone, just say, like, I've read your website. What new are you going to be supporting in 2020? So we got time for one more. There was, yes. I've sort of done that side and this side, so now the middle gets some love.
Kyle from Wise. With a comment, we're all required in this room, no doubt about it. If you read the comments on VermontDigger.com,
people read them,
or ever listen to Common Sense Radio on WBEG, you see that there is a concerted effort on the part of the Ethan Allen Institute to denigrate all the work that you and we are doing. There's in the comments section of Vermont Digger, there is an opportunity to do thumbs up or thumbs down on the comments, and I swear there is a whole coalition of people who thumbs up on the denial side and thumbs down on the renewables side. We need to be aware of those and do our part, even though we may not be able to convince individuals who are drinking the Kool-Aid, but show that we support en masse.
Thank you, Dottie. I appreciate that comment. I would say, I don't know about how much value there would be in like following the comments on Digger. It's about 50 of the same people who don't have a lot to do apparently and are standing in the way between progress and a habitable planet. So I would also say that it is really important to make your voice heard. We need to support our allies in the legislature. We need to build the number of allies that we have, which means I think the pitch that Linda Gray has made and the work that we're going to do together with Linda, with other members of energy committees who have raised their hand and said that we're going to figure out what that sort of more formulaic approach looks to continue to harness the passion of people at the local level who understand that not doing enough incremental insufficient change is highly costly, not only to our pocketbooks, but to our quality of life and to life as we know it. And I think that this is only a starting point. We're going to help you move this policy agenda this coming session. We have tools in our toolbox that will help us work with you all to make sure that that happens. This is an open conversation. We are allies in this room. We have a huge opportunity and certainly an obligation before us. And we are going to be here today and moving forward to do everything that we can. Until then, I would say there is an all vegetarian lunch in that room down that way. We'll see you at the next. Please make sure you visit the sponsors, continue the dialogue. We'll see you at the workshop at 1:45 and back here at 3:15. Thank you. And thank you to our fabulous.